I have sat on this bench for over 40 years, and I will tell you something that most people never learn until it is too late. Justice is not always about the law. Sometimes justice is about looking a young man in the eyes and seeing something that no traffic ticket, no court document, and no legal code can ever measure. Sometimes the most powerful thing a judge can do has nothing to do with a gavel. If you are new here, welcome to my courtroom. My name is Judge Frank Caprio, and for 4 decades I have seen every kind of person walk through that door. The guilty, the innocent, the arrogant, the broken, the ones who think money puts them above the law, and the ones who can barely stand up straight because life has hit them so hard they do not even know why they are still standing. I have seen all of it, but every once in a while a case walks in that I never forget. This is one of those cases, and if you think you already know where this story is going, I promise you, you do not even close. Before I go one more word further, I need to ask you something. If you believe that a judge's most important job is not punishment but humanity, hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel, because what I am about to share with you is the reason I still show up to this bench every single morning. It was a Tuesday in October, the kind of morning where Providence, Rhode Island feels old and quiet. The sky outside my courtroom window was the color of cold ash. I arrived at 7:45 in the morning, which is my habit. I reviewed the docket. There were 22 cases on the schedule for that session. Most of them were minor traffic violations. A few were more serious. My clerk, Sandra, who has worked beside me for 11 years, handed me my coffee and said, "Full house today, Judge." She said it the way she always does, not with dread, just with the quiet readiness of someone who knows that every case on that list belongs to a real human being. I took my seat at 9:30 a.m. sharp. The courtroom was already packed. I could feel the energy in the room before I even looked up. There were people in the gallery watching, the way they always do. Some were there for themselves, some were there for the person beside them. The air smelled like coffee and nervous energy. The first few cases that morning were routine. A young woman with 2 parking tickets from East Side, a man who had not updated his vehicle registration. Small things. I disposed of them quickly and fairly. And then, around 9:47 in the morning, the clerk called the next name, Tyler Harrington, 24 years old. The moment he walked through the door, I noticed him, not because he was loud, but because everything about him was designed to be noticed. He was wearing a Burberry sport coat over a fitted white shirt. He had on a pair of Gucci loafers that I am certain cost more than most people's monthly rent. He had a gold Rolex Presidential on his left wrist, the kind his father probably bought him as a graduation gift. His hair was perfectly styled. He walked to the stand the way some young men do when they have never once been told the word no. Slow, easy, like the whole world was waiting for him. My clerk read the charges. Tyler Harrington had been clocked by Officer Dennis Souza, badge number 2287, doing 67 miles per hour in a 35-mile-per-hour zone on Broad Street at 11:12 p.m. on September 14th. He had also received a citation for running a solid red light at the intersection of Park and Cranston at that same time. The speed was nearly double the limit in a residential neighborhood at night. This was not a small thing. I looked at him and I asked the question I always ask. "How do you wish to plead?" He glanced down at his phone. He actually looked at his phone before he answered me. Then he looked up with a half smile and said, "Your Honor, my father's attorney told me this would probably just get dismissed. He said these things usually do. We donate pretty regularly to the city." I want you to understand what I felt in that moment. It was not anger. Anger is too simple. What I felt was a deep and heavy sadness, because I have seen this before, the young man who grows up surrounded by so much comfort and so much power that he genuinely does not understand that a courtroom is not a country club, that a judge is not a favor to be called in, that the law, my law, does not have a VIP section. I told him very calmly, "Son, I don't know what your father's attorney told you, but I am going to tell you something for free. In my courtroom, donations mean nothing. What means something is whether you understand why you were wrong. Do you?" He shrugged. He actually shrugged. I fined him the maximum for both violations, $850 total, plus mandatory defensive driving school, plus a 90-day license suspension. and I told him that if I ever saw his name on my docket again for reckless driving, I would not be as kind. He looked genuinely stunned, like no one had ever said those words to him before. Maybe no one had. He left the courtroom checking his phone again. I watched him go, and then Sandra called the next name, Marcus Webb. That is a name I will carry with me for the rest of my life. He walked in wearing a navy blue hoodie from Providence College. It was clean but worn, the kind of worn you get from washing something too many times because you only have a few things to wear. He was 20 years old. He had a manila envelope in his hand, and he was holding it like it was the most important thing in the world. His eyes were red around the edges, not from crying right then, from the kind of tired that builds up over weeks, the deep, hollow tired that lives behind a person's eyes when grief has been sitting on their chest for too long. He stepped up to the stand and he looked at me with the most honest face I have seen in a long time. Not defiant, not afraid, just honest. The face of a young man who has nothing left to hide and nothing left to lose. Sandra read his file. Marcus Darnell Webb, age 20, student at Providence College. Case number CR 2024-100447. He had 4 separate traffic citations, all issued within a period of 9 days in late September. The first was a speeding ticket, 54 and a 35, issued on September 21st at 10:47 p.m. on Route 10 South. Officer Diane Marrera, badge number 4471. The second was a failure to stop at a marked crosswalk, same officer, September 23rd. The third was an expired registration sticker, September 27th. And the fourth was another speeding citation, 49 in a 35, Route 146 North, issued September 29th at 2:23 in the morning by Officer Carl Braga, badge number 3892. 2:23 in the morning. That detail sat with me. The fines, if I enforced them all at the standard rate, would have totaled $1,240 for a 20-year-old college student. That is a number that can change the course of a person's life. I looked at him and I said, Marcus, these are 4 violations in 9 days. That is a pattern that concerns me. Do you want to tell me what is going on? He opened his mouth, and then he closed it. He looked down at the envelope in his hands for a moment, and then he looked back up at me and said, Your Honor, my dad died on September 30th. The courtroom went absolutely silent. Not the polite silence of people being respectful, the real silence, the kind that fills a room when something true and heavy lands in the middle of it. I let the silence hold for a moment. Then I said, I am very sorry, son. Tell me about your dad. He took a breath. He said, his name was Raymond Webb. He worked construction for 22 years. He never missed a day. He raised me and my 2 little sisters by himself after my mom passed when I was 12. He was the strongest person I ever knew. He paused. He got diagnosed with congestive heart failure in June. They told him he needed surgery, but the insurance denied the claim, twice. He was on a list for a procedure that never came. He stopped talking for a moment. He pressed his lips together. He was not going to cry in front of me. I could see that decision on his face. He was a young man who had been strong for a long time. He had learned how to hold it in. I asked him quietly, where were you going at 10:47 on the night of September 21st and at 2:23 in the morning on September 29th? He looked at me and said, Work, sir. I have 2 jobs. I work the front desk at a hotel on North Main from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. on weekends, and I deliver for a restaurant during the week. I have been sending money home every 2 weeks since June to help pay for my dad's medications, the ones insurance would not cover. I looked at the file in front of me. This young man was driving back and forth across this city in the middle of the night, working double shifts, sending money home, studying for his classes during the day, and somewhere in the middle of all of that, his speedometer crept past the limit by 15 miles an hour because he was tired or scared or both. And now he was standing in front of me with 4 tickets and $1,240 that he absolutely did not have. Now here's the part I need to ask you something before I continue, because I want to know if you think you could handle what Marcus was handling at 20 years old. Before I tell you what happened next, do me a favor. If this story is hitting you in the chest the way it is hitting me right now, leave a comment below and tell me one thing. What would you have done if Marcus was standing in front of you? Because what I did next is something I do not take lightly, and I want you to understand every piece of why. I asked him to show me what was in the envelope. He placed it on the desk slowly. Inside were three things: his father's death certificate, a stack of hospital billing statements with the words "Insurance Denied" stamped in red across the top, and a receipt from Western Union. 7 separate money transfers sent from Marcus Webb to Raymond Webb between June 14th and September 27th. The total amount sent was $3,400. He had wired $3,400 to his sick father while working 2 jobs and going to school full-time. I held those papers in my hands and I felt the weight of them. Real weight, not the paper weight, the human weight. I said to him, "Marcus, were you aware that all 4 of these tickets were still outstanding? That if I enforced them today, they would go on your driving record and potentially affect your license?" He nodded. He said, "Yes, sir, I know. I was going to try to pay them, but after the funeral last week, I had to use my savings to help my sisters. My youngest sister is 14. My other one is 17. I am the only one left now." He said those last 6 words so quietly that I almost missed them. I am the only one left now. He said it without self-pity, just as a fact. A hard, plain, terrible fact. The woman behind him in the gallery, I later learned she was his neighbor from back home in Woonsocket. She had her hand over her mouth. A man to her right had his eyes closed. And then something happened that I did not expect. My clerk, Sandra, who has been in this courtroom for 11 years and has seen just about everything, she turned slightly in her chair. She did not say a word. She just turned. I noticed it because she never does that. Sandra is a professional. She stays still. But something about Marcus Webb made her turn. I asked him one more question. I said, "Marcus, when did you last sleep more than 4 hours in a row?" He thought about it. He genuinely had to think about it, like the question required him to go back through his memory and search for the answer. Finally, he said, "Maybe 3 weeks ago, before my dad went into the hospital the last time. 3 weeks. He had not slept properly in 3 weeks. And then I noticed something else, something that my clerk had flagged in the file and placed a small yellow sticky note beside. I pulled that note closer and I read it carefully. It was a note from Officer Diane Marrera, the officer who had written the first 2 citations. The note read, "Recommend judge review." Subject was cooperative and visibly distressed at time of stop on 9/21. Stated father was critically ill. Recommend leniency consideration per department compassion protocol. Officer Marrera had pulled Marcus over, written the ticket as required by law, and then gone back to her patrol car and written that note. She put it in the file herself. She did not have to do that. Nobody asked her to do that. She did it because she is a good officer and she could see what I was now seeing. I set the note down. I looked at Marcus. He was standing very still, patient, the way people stand when they have been patient for a long time and they do not know how to stop. Now here is where this story takes a turn that I truly did not see coming. And I want to be clear, I have been on this bench for over 4 decades, and this moment still surprised me. So if you have been watching this long, you know something big is coming. I want you to stay with me, because what I am about to tell you changes everything about this case, and it reveals something about this young man that goes so much deeper than 4 traffic tickets. My law clerk, a sharp young man named Anthony Reyes, who reviews digital exhibits for my court, had done something before this session began. He had looked up Marcus Webb online. It is something my office began doing several years ago as part of standard case preparation, and what Anthony found was not a criminal record. It was not a drug charge or a warrant somewhere. What he found was a post on Marcus's Instagram account, posted on October 1st, the day after his father died. Anthony printed it and brought it to me that morning. I had it in the folder the entire time. The post showed a photograph. It was Marcus and his father, Raymond, at what looked like a backyard cookout. Raymond Webb was a big man, broad shoulders, thick hands, a smile so wide and warm that it came right through the screen. Marcus was about 16 in the photo, standing next to his dad with his arm around him, both of them laughing at something off camera. Under the photo, Marcus had written the following words, I am going to read them to you exactly as he wrote them. He wrote, Dad, I don't have the words yet, so I'll just say thank you. Thank you for every single ride to school, every bowl of cereal when the refrigerator was empty, every time you told me I was going to be something when I did not believe it myself. You worked yourself into the ground for us, and you never once complained. I promise you I will take care of them. I promise you I'm going to finish school. I promise you it was not for nothing. Rest now. You earned it. I love you, Pop. Always your son, Marcus. 11,000 likes, 462 comments. People from all over the country had found that post. Strangers who did not know Raymond Webb from any other man. And every single comment was some version of the same thing. Rest in peace. You raised a great son. Your dad is proud of you. I read that post in my chair while Marcus was standing in front of me, and I will tell you something. I am not a man who shows emotion easily. I have trained myself over 40 years to hold my composure on this bench because that is what my court requires. But reading those words from a 20-year-old boy about his father, holding those Western Union receipts in my other hand, with Officer Morera's note right there beside me, I felt something shift inside my chest. The way something shifts when you know beyond any legal argument or procedural question what the right thing to do is. I want to ask you something right now, and I mean this sincerely. If you are watching this video, you are part of a community of people who believe that courts should see human beings, not just case numbers. That matters more than the algorithm. So if this story is moving you the way it moved everyone in that courtroom that day, share this video with one person right now, one person who needs to hear that justice still has a heart, because the moment I am about to describe is exactly why this channel exists. I set the papers down, I folded my hands in front of me the way I do when I have made a decision that I know is final, and I looked at Marcus Webb. He was watching me, still patient, still holding himself together with everything he had. I said to him, Marcus, I want to read something to you, and I want you to listen. And I read his Instagram post back to him, out loud. In that courtroom, every word. When I finished, the room was so quiet you could hear the ventilation system running in the ceiling. Marcus was looking at the floor. His jaw was tight. His hands, which had been holding the edge of the podium, released. He let go. He stood there with his arms at his sides. I said, I want you to look at me. He looked up. I said, your father raised a remarkable young man. What you have done for your family, working 2 jobs, sending money home, staying in school through all of this, that is not something most grown adults could do. Your father knew that. That post tells me he knew exactly who you were. At that point, something happened in the back of the courtroom that I have thought about many times since that day. A man stood up in the gallery. He was wearing a gray work jacket. Heavy-set man, maybe 60 years old. He had a Providence Public Works badge clipped to his chest, the kind the city sanitation workers wear. He raised his hand slightly, the way you do in school when you want to speak, but you are not sure if it is allowed. I recognized him. His name was Gerald Tatum. He was a city employee who had appeared in my court once before, about 8 years ago, for a minor registration issue. I remembered him because he had been polite and honest, the same way he was standing right now. Gerald Tatum had worked with Raymond Webb on a city construction crew for 11 years. I gave him the nod. Gerald cleared his throat and said, Your Honor, I apologize for speaking out of turn. I just want the court to know that Raymond Webb was the hardest working man I ever shared a job site with. He talked about this boy every single day, every day. He used to pull out his phone and show us Marcus's grades. He was so proud. Gerald's voice cracked. He sat back down. He pressed his hands flat on his knees. I thanked him, and I turned back to Marcus. I said, Marcus Darnell Webb, I am looking at 4 traffic citations issued between September 21st and September 29th of this year. I am looking at the surrounding facts of your life during those 9 days, the illness of your father, your employment history, your financial contributions to your family, Officer Morera's notes, and the character of the young man standing before me right now. I paused. All 4 citations are dismissed, every single one. No fine, no record, no point against your license. I heard the woman in the gallery inhale sharply. Someone else said something quiet that I did not catch. Marcus stood very still. He blinked twice. He said, "Sir?" I said, "You heard me. All four. Dismissed." He pressed his lips together so hard they went white. He nodded once. He said, "Thank you, Your Honor." His voice barely made it out, but I was not finished. I said, "I also want you to know that I am going to make a personal call today to the Dean of Student Affairs at Providence College to make sure your academic standing is protected while you process what you are going through. Grief takes time. You are allowed to take time." He nodded again. He was losing the battle with himself now. I could see it. 20 years old, holding 2 jobs, raising 2 sisters, and no one had told him until this moment that it was okay to not be okay. I stood up from the bench. This is not something I do often. In 40 years, I have done it maybe a handful of times. But I came down from that bench and I walked to where Marcus was standing. He looked up at me with those tired, red-rimmed eyes, and I put both arms around that young man and I held him. I held him the way I hoped someone held my own sons when the world felt too heavy. I held him the way a father holds a son. He broke, right there. He put his face down and he cried, not the quiet kind, the real kind, the kind that had been building for weeks, maybe months, since June when he found out his dad was sick, and he started driving back and forth across this city in the middle of the night trying to save him. He cried in my courtroom in front of strangers, and it was the most dignified thing I have ever witnessed. When he pulled back, I looked at him and I said, "Your dad is watching right now, and he is not worried about you. You know why? Because he already knows who you are." Marcus Webb straightened up. He wiped his face with the sleeve of his worn blue hoodie, and he said one more thing to me before he turned to leave. He said, "Judge, I am going to finish school, I promise." I said, "I know you will." And I meant it with every part of me. Now let me tell you what I want you to take away from today's story, because I did not share this to make you feel good for 5 minutes and then forget it. I shared it because it matters. I have sat in this chair through 4 decades of this city's life. I have seen prosperity and I have seen poverty. I have seen men in $1,000 shoes try to buy their way out of accountability, and I have seen men in worn-out hoodies carry more dignity than most of us will ever manage. And what I have learned, what this job has taught me every single day for 40 years, is that the law is a tool, a good one, a necessary one. But it is only as good as the human being holding it. Raymond Webb never got to see his son graduate. He never got to shake his hand at the finish line, but he did something more important than that. He showed Marcus every day through every bowl of cereal and every long shift and every photograph of a beaming father showing off his son's grades to coworkers what it looks like to be a man. You show up, you do not complain, you work, you love your family, and you put them first. That is the whole lesson. Raymond taught it without ever standing at a podium or writing it down. And Marcus learned it. I could see it in the way he held himself, in the way he held that envelope, in those 7 Western Union receipts totaling $3,400 that he wired to his sick father from a second-floor dormitory room at Providence College. That is Raymond Webb's legacy, standing right in front of me in a navy blue hoodie. Justice, real justice, is not blind in the way people think. It does not ignore the facts. It sees all of them, including the ones that are not written in the citation, including the ones that are written in a young man's eyes at 9 in the morning in October, when the sky outside is the color of cold ash and he is the only one left. That is what I showed up to do today. That is what I will show up to do tomorrow. And I want you to know something else. After the session ended that day, Gerald Tatum waited by the door. He waited for Marcus. When Marcus came out, Gerald shook his hand for a long time. 2 men who both loved Raymond Webb, standing in the hallway of a courthouse in Providence, holding each other's hands. I saw it through the door, and I thought, Raymond, you did good. If this story moved you the way it moved everyone in that courtroom, I am asking you from the heart to do one thing. Subscribe to this channel, share this video with someone you love, and leave a comment below telling me the name of the person in your life who worked themselves into the ground for you, the way Raymond Webb did for Marcus. I want to hear their names. I want this comment section to become a place where we honor those people. They deserve it. And next time, I have a story coming that will make your jaw drop completely. A defendant walks into my courtroom wearing a $10,000 watch, asks me if I know who his father is, and leaves in handcuffs after federal agents walk through that same door. You do not want to miss it. Stick with me. I will see you there.